So hello, everyone. My name is Elena, and I'm a data scientist working in O21. I'm also a tech mentor for the course Data Science with Python for the FrauenLoop, where we teach women immigrants. Yeah, I think people are not ready yet.
I think they understand us.
Yep. Okay. So should I start from the beginning? Oh, okay. I see the difference. Yeah. So hello, everyone. I hope that you're ready for some great discussion about the future of mobility. My name is Elena. I'm a data scientist working in O21. I'm also a tech mentor for the course Data Science with Python at the FrauenLoop nonprofit organization. And today, especially for you, I'm going to be your moderator for this panel. So, I'm extremely excited to welcome you here, and I hope that your first day of the conference is going well. I'm excited also to talk about this topic, not because it's only it's tech, innovation, and data that changes the world. But I'm also excited to be here because I'm going to talk with two amazing people here just nearby me. So let me introduce them to you. So we have here CEO and founder of the German Autolabs, Berlin-based tech startup, building the digital assistant for drivers called Chris. Holger Weiss. Say hello.
Hi.
Yeah, so Holger Weiss has more than 15 years of experience in the mobility, so we should listen for this person. So, also we have another speaker, as you might notice. We have CEO of Predict.io. Is also Berlin-based tech startup, which builds the software development kit for activity detection. So by doing that, the user engagement in the right moment. So the most popular cases from the mobility are the parking guidance, parking payments, and also mobile ticketing. Is that right?
Absolutely, you're hired.
Great. So yeah, yes. So it is a very exciting topic, as I said to you, and I would like you all to interact with us. So that's why I would like you to know that if during these next 30 to 40 minutes you have any questions about some specific questions that depended on the context of the question that we answer, I would like you to raise your hand, make sure that we will see you, and so we're going to make sure to answer your question. All right? Okay, I don't see you, but yeah, I got it. So yeah, let's start with something simple, right? So let's first define what is mobility and why is it important to innovate in this sector.
So I can start by speaking how I look at mobility and how it connects what has been digitalized a long while ago, which is search. And on the other side, checkout. So if you think about Amazon, they control where you buy product. If you think about Google and Facebook, they control where you find information and where you search for things. But then there is something missing in between, which is mobility, which is really physically you going to the product or the product going to you. So this missing bridge between search and checkout is what mobility is in the grand scheme of things. And this is why a lot of very different players, like the over-the-top players, the mobile network operators, the car manufacturers, they all currently collide in this field, mobility, which, and we're here at Data Natives, which in the end is a game about data, location data. So this is how I look at mobility and how it matters.
All right, great. So what about you?
So didn't you say let's start with something simple? Defining mobility. So I agree with everything Silvan just said, and I would even go a level higher, where I would say, at the moment, and that might also answer this question that you had as a second, why it's about to be innovated now. So I would say we are at the moment in the third age of mobility, and the first age actually started with the invention of the wheel, right? Before, people were able to walk from one cave to the other and from one valley to the other, and then the wheel was invented, and that was actually for a couple of thousands of years the way mobility happened, right? So you had your car, and the car was pulled by horses, etc. And for almost 6,000–7,000 years, nothing happened in mobility afterwards. And then earlier, or end of the 19th century, this German guy next to Stuttgart, Karl Benz, he invented the engine and replaced horses by the engine, and that is the mobility that we all were growing up with, and of course then you had jet mobility, etc. But that was the first kickoff of mass mobility. So people could move from A to B, long distance, etc. So, and then for another 100 years nothing happened, and that is one of the problems of the industry today, because there was not really a major push to the automotive industry over the past 100 years. But now something happened, mainly over the past 5 years, or 15 years, but the 5 years we're realizing, which is the third age of mobility, is having the internet in mobility. And that is something that brings a complete new flavor to it, which actually means that as we developed cities with on a new way with the appearance of cars and engines, etc., and we had to move out all the horses of the city, etc., we now also have to reinvent it, because it's possible. And it's something where we have different layers, and the fifth dimension where we have flying mobility, and we maybe have tunneled mobility, etc., and so on.
All right, so saying things short, mobility is movement, right? It's a process of moving from A to B, and we need to innovate in this area. So, yeah, actually, what are the challenges that you both are facing in this sector? What do you find the most challenging and also interesting and also moving for yourself?
So I think one of the biggest challenges here is that it's probably in a pyramid of hierarchy, very high up mobility to many people, right? And people move to their workplace, and they earn money and feed their families. They meet friends, etc. So it's a fundamental element of our daily life. Right. And also of the welfare we have, if we have good streets and we have punctual traffic and so on and so forth. And therefore, everyone somehow is influenced by this. That's one thing. The other thing is that traditional mass mobility, in its iteration, and I said this, for 100 years in the automotive industry, there was not really great inventions. It's a very slow type of industry, or a very slow type of innovation traditionally, whereas, as we all know, in our days and the digital age, innovation happens within a relatively short period of times, right? And that is something that has to be merged, meaning that in order to have really autonomous driving cars everywhere, it's a huge question of infrastructure. It's a huge question of legal and social questions that need to be solved. Sure. And there's a conflict of generations, and there's a conflict of industries that are actually starting to fight, and therefore it's such a big topic. Huge challenges, but also huge chances for entrepreneurship.
Oh, yeah, so I also know that you're mentoring, you're a business angel for entrepreneurs, right? So is there a lot of people that go into the industry right now, in the mobility industry?
A lot of people who are doing what?
A lot of entrepreneurs.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's something, I tried in 2011 to fund a startup based on a mobility pitch, right? And as you familiar with startups, you always need the storytelling and the pitch, etc. It needs to somehow fit into an investor's mind and so on. And by these very long production cycles or industry cycles, it was almost impossible. And that has changed completely, right? I mean, now we have elements like car sharing and peer-to-peer car sharing, and we have all these evolutions that we have. So there's a lot of entrepreneurship at the moment rushing into that area.
All right, so which kind of problems do those startups resolve usually? Is it usually about car sharing, like, drive to go?
See, that's a good question, and that's a little bit the issue with what is mobility, your first question, right? There are companies who just digitalizing the process, how to buy a train ticket, right? I mean, there's a huge company in Berlin, Go Euro, and what they do, they digitalize bus and train and whatever traffic all over Europe and allow you to buy a ticket, right? That's one thing. And on the other side, you have companies like Nutonomy or Cruise Automation. They're building autonomous driving platforms, right? And you see, I mean, it both has to do with innovation of mobility, but very different angles. And in that respect, the challenges we have to solve or that we can solve are, on the one hand, definitely, let's say, in existing businesses to digitalize it and to make it easier and more convenient and more efficient. And on the other side, the way how we will be mobile in 15 years will have very little to do with the way we are mobile today.
Do you think something about it?
Yeah, I mean, when I hear Holger talk, and a thought I had a little bit earlier also was, it's very unclear how this battlefield is going to play out, because there's so many different players currently, the people that are colliding in this market, and also the interests are quite different. So, for example, if you think about location data being one of the core assets in mobility, then if you think about the Googles or the Apples, they have more location data about you than any car can ever produce about you. But then again, the car is also a screen, or is going to be a screen. So when you are in a self-driving car, you can consume more things while you're driving because you have additional screen time. So suddenly, you get eyeballs on top of location data. So eyeballs is the currency that the Silicon Valley has been operating for the last 10 years on, right? So WhatsApp, for example, only because people look at it very, very often and it generates data, was worth so much. So then there's a third element that a car provides or mobility provides, which is a vessel. So you have the ability to physically move things or people, so which is not possible with a handset, for example, which would also produce the data. So if I think about what mobility is for the different players, then those are the three, let's say, elements that they would battle for. And different players battle for different things. So just doing a sidestep a little bit to the data side again. So who in this room has an iPhone? Can I see a show of hands? There's like half.
I think everyone.
It's like half, I would say. So
then just try.
Should be more on the conference.
So who knows that your iPhone has a separate CPU on there? It's called A11. And this CPU does nothing but spy on you and sends this data back. So there's sensors on your phone, like a gyroscope, an accelerometer, an air pressure sensor, a light sensor. And all those sensors are being read all the time, and the CPU figures out what you do and where you arrive. So for example, that you've arrived into a store, that you just walked into home, and this information is being used for things like Apple Maps telling you it's 25 minutes to work today. You never told it where you work, but it knows where you work. So these data is already there. So Apple and Google, we all given our consent to them using the data, has more data than a car can ever produce about you. The only additional things a car can do is obviously scan the surroundings. So being able to understand, image recognition-wise, because it's huge data sets, image recognition still. And even there, those players, Apple and Google, are making strides currently. For example, Apple has launched something called Core ML, which leverages this CPU I just explained on the device to process, for example, neural networks directly on the device. Just recently, Google has launched TensorFlow Lite, which also runs on the phones. If you take the Google Pixel 2, it, for example, has a dedicated chip on there that helps process image information. So even there, if you think about what a car can do specifically in the area of data, it's getting narrower and narrower. The other two elements, so additional screen time and obviously being a vessel, is something that the phones can't necessarily do. So it's a very interesting battlefield, I think.
No, absolutely, and I mean that's something that that is the whole own area. If you see, we all talking about autonomous driving and how exciting that might be one day, but not too many people realizing that autonomous driving car at the moment with all the sensors is producing something like a terabyte data per hour, right? And a terabyte data per hour means a lot of bandwidth if you want to send this through your Vodafone network, right? So this fundamentally...
The MNOs would like that.
Yeah. No, they wouldn't, because you cannot afford to build that infrastructure, and 5G is almost a decade away, etc. So now we are all eager to, and if you're looking into Silicon Valley, talking there to investors and entrepreneurs, they all telling you 2019 we all driving autonomous, and Tesla will be the new Volkswagen Golf, which I don't share completely.
So what do you think?
I think it will come faster than most of the people expect. So I think we will see autonomous systems on the street in this time frame, 2020, 2022. Very likely something like a public transport system, dedicated lanes where you have a bus driving independently, but there always will be a safety driver. There might be shuttles, on-demand shuttles, but also on dedicated lanes. And we will see in this time frame the first type of logistic systems like truck platooning, where you put 6, 7, 8 trucks together to one truck train, and they driving with the same distance and the same speed. But that we all will drive autonomous, and I'm walking out of this conference here and calling my autonomous driving cab, and it drives me back to the office, etc. I say not before 2030, 2035. That would be my guess.
All right, but we do know that these migration, this transformation is not going to be evenly distributed. So we do know that it's going to depend on all kinds of dimensions, and it's going to be dependent on demographics, geographically. So you talked about Silicon Valley. So we can imagine certain future for Silicon Valley, but it's going to be different for Europe, for example, or let's say other countries.
Yeah, interesting enough, I think the fastest evolving region will not be the US or Europe, it will be Asia. If you're looking into these mega cities in Asia, and in 2030, 75% of world population will live in mega cities, the congestion and the traffic is so bad that the need for the systems is simply so pressuring. On the other side, let's say the adoption rate for new technologies in these areas is very high. So if you see the Chinese super cities, also by the political system, I think we will see maybe what I just said earlier in 2025 in some Asian cities, right? On the other side, we definitely have with Silicon Valley, we have a technology hotspot where things always happen first and so on. But that doesn't mean that all the United States will do the same thing, right?
Yeah, that's understandable. Yeah. So let's continue. We were talking about like this span of time, and you were talking about that you take your autonomous car and you go wherever you want. So how would the typical day of the customer, of the individual, look like in those 20 to 30 years? Can you imagine this world and share us?
So let's say a Tuesday morning in 2030, right? I'm living in Berlin. And we all have this second chip for years on our iPhones and somewhere. So there are networks knowing ultimately everything of you. And you will have digital assistants that will talk to you, and you will talk to your environment. That is something that we will see very naturally over the next 5-6 years, that we're using voice very naturally to talk to our environment. So, and there will be your digital assistant. It might be Alexa, but there will be a lot of other assistants depending on the verticals you're moving in, waking you up and telling you what's the time and what's the weather and how you have to dress. Maybe whatever your augmented reality mirror in your wardrobe already gave you the picture how this looks like. At the very moment you're leaving the home, there will be a self-driving pod coming in front of your door in the very second, because it actually tracks your way down from the apartment. It knows exactly when you're leaving, and it knows exactly where you're going. And this will be the big fight for the next 15 years. Who will own this knowledge? And there will be a strong push on regulation and governments, but this is pretty much what's going to happen. Then the question is, are you willing to pay for that? Or it's something where you say, no, come on, drive me to the office or to the university for free. And if it's for free, it's something where you will probably get offered advertisement, things like that. Or there might be a Starbucks-powered shuttle just offering you the coffee while you're there, and you buy the coffee, and therefore the ride is for free, etc. The ride might vary between, I don't know, 15–20% of time every day, because it's very optimized in the way, and you're accepting that you might going to go a detour according to how this ride is being organized. So I think that's a very realistic scenario, and it also will be very realistic that at that time, 2030, we will have 40–50% of the fleet of cars being shared and being level 5 autonomous enabled. Level 5, we have these 5 levels of autonomous driving that were given by the North American traffic authorities, and level 5 is no steering wheel, no pedals, no steering wheel, right? So no interaction, and I think that's something that we will definitely.
So you think there's going to be no anything in a certain point? So you're just going to sit down and relax?
Oh, absolutely.
Hopefully.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
All right,
yeah.
all right. So to make it clear, so in the mobility, there's two divergent opinions. So either it's going to be a whole, innovation, and it's going to be, we're going to automate everything, as we're going to sit down and, as you told, like this, having this beautiful life and pretty nice, honestly saying. Either it's going to be more or less, it's going to follow more older, linear trend, and it's going to transform certain things, certain areas, but in the same time, we're going to have those private ownership of controlled driving vehicles, right? So as I see, you're more the first opinion person, so you believe in this future of the full autonomy, of the full, giving control to the car.
So,
basically
yes.
to the AI and to data, right?
I'm pretty sure that, at least in the Western world and parts of Asia, etc., it all moves into fully autonomous driving environment. So private ownership will be still available. And there also will be cars that you drive yourself, old-timers, that are being built in 2025. At that time, then an old-timer. But it's a little bit like horse riding. So for, as I just explained to you, 7,000 years, horses were pulling cars. And now we replace them by an engine in the late 19th century. But people still riding horses. But they don't do it on the street anymore, unless there's whatever, a parade or something. They go somewhere in the forest or somewhere in the countryside where they have their horse. It's a love affair. You have horses because it's a hobby, and they're prestigious, and you collect them and you breed them, etc. People will do the same with cars. They go on Friday somewhere on one of the old racing tracks from the early 20th century and driving their cars. But what we will not see is that we will have mixed environment of fully autonomous driving carpool and self-driving cars, because that doesn't work. I once listened to speech of the CEO of one of the leading car suppliers, Dr. Sommer from ZF, and he said, because it's expected that with the fully autonomous driving environment, the rate of death casualties and accidents will decrease by 95%, 91%, right? Because all that is human errors and
that's
people.
true. That's
so
true. Yeah.
There's a good reason for that. But he said we will just extinguish accidents only if we have autonomous wildlife. So if there's no deer jumping into your autonomous driving car anymore, then we will be completely safe.
Yeah, so the access is going to drop if we see this future. Also, what we're going to have, I think that we're going to have much less traffic jams, right, because of the sensors, for example. And so, yeah, I mean, there's tons of things to look forward to. So let's hope that
But the even more interesting question was what you just touched with. What are we doing with this time, right? So, I mean,
screen time.
Sure, of course, a co-driver sitting and playing on WhatsApp, and the kids on the rear seat sleeping and watching a movie already today. But there are a lot of people who are driving their cars every day, going to the office in an hour and coming back. What are you doing with the time, Silvan?
It's actually one of the interesting arguments. If you would still have private car ownership, if they're self-driving cars, why not everybody's using taxis? Actually, my personal opinion is, I mean, if you have such a stressful life at work and probably at home with your family, you will want to have those 20 minutes commute for yourself. So I think there's still going to be, you know, quality to commuting on your own in a self-driving car. But probably for the masses, people who cannot afford it or don't want it, they would want to use shared mobility. So I think in the same direction. I just have a couple of statistics I also want to mention. So if you take the total retail market globally, which is any product sold, any service sold, it's 10 trillion US dollars. So that's the annual revenue in retail. If you look at mobility, for example, this is everything from, you know, flights to train tickets to taxis, all included. It's 6 trillion. So if you look at communication, it's roughly, you know, 4 to 4.5. So if you look at the market sizes, then retail, by the nature of it, is obviously the larger beast, and then mobility is a very big beast, just you know, as a close follow-up, so to speak. So again, speaking about all those things colliding, selling you things while you drive, or you know, providing services, you know, things being delivered into your car, or you renting out your car to make money with it while you don't use your car. All those type of things will surely evolve. Question is, who's going to win that? So who's going to do that? If we look at the sizing of a couple of those players, if you take Ford, they have like 43 billion US dollars valuation currently. If you look at BMW, a little bit more, 44 billion, something like that. So together they make just shy of 90 billion US dollars. Uber, a company that didn't exist, you know, a while ago, they're currently poised anywhere between 80 and 100 billion US dollars. Just in comparison, somebody like Lufthansa is valued at 7 billion. So not even 1/10 like a company, as a company like Uber, who own eyeballs and who have low infrastructure and have a lot of data. So I think it's super, super interesting who's providing which services for this future mobility that is definitely poised to change.
All right, so yeah, though we can talk about changes, now talking about people, right? So we need to talk about the workforce too. So we do know that the technology changes jobs, not work, but jobs it does. And so how the future of mobility will impact the company's talent needs and the broader workforce?
So I think we first would put this a little bit in parts. So what type of workers or jobs, etc., influence? And of course, if we have autonomous driving carpool, there are no taxi drivers anymore. There also are no Uber drivers anymore, right? And that is why they're all investing so massively into this autonomous driving technology. It's a kind of commercial reason, right? I mean, there's a technical reason, but if you don't need drivers anymore, it's way cheaper. That's one thing. The other thing is that these huge industry like the automotive industry at the moment is just about to start, but they will undergo over the next 2 decades so massive changes that in countries like Germany are depending very strongly on a very strong industry like the automotive industry, the landscape will change significantly. So it's not that, I mean, someone still need to build those cars. So meaning there will be factories who building autonomous driving cars, etc. And this change, believe me, guys, from diesel to electrification, we will manage that. I mean, that's something. That's not the big thing. The big thing is more into one is the thing that Silvan just mentioned in the valuation. So where is the IP of this company? Where is the intellectual property? Is it just putting parts together and someone owns the platform because Uber goes there or whoever then will be in charge? And so I'm ordering, like this guy yesterday ordered 430 Airbus 320. And in future, someone like Uber might gonna order with Volkswagen 15,000 cars with this and that configuration, and they just built that. But the platform is owned by Uber, and that will have a significant impact on the workforce because a lot of people are not being needed anymore in these big companies.
There's 2 more interesting thoughts about the structure of this industry. If you look at a car manufacturer, I mean, they obviously do have intellectual property, but really what they're good at is managing supply chain. So, I mean, they had a brand, and people they looked up to owning a Mercedes-Benz or a BMW. So still today, there's some connection to the brand. So essentially, they are buying all the parts. So Bosch, Continental, ZF Friedrichshafen, they own a lot of the intellectual property. If you think about people like Mobileye, the Israeli company that's behind the self-driving car technology of most of the current car manufacturers. So the IP often is with other people, and the car manufacturers, they were very good at managing the supply, putting stuff together, putting their brand on it. Now, what happens if the brand of a car manufacturer is less important in the future? So the millennials and the people currently, they identify with Musical.ly, an app, or they would identify with Apple much more than they would with Mercedes-Benz. So suddenly one of the core values of a car manufacturer falls away. So, and what is Continental and Bosch and the other folks stopping from, winning big deals with Apple and Amazon and the like? So there's no reason for Amazon to build their own car, right? They can just buy it from people who can already do it. So the entry level into this mobility market is shrinking. If you think about the Uber situation also, they've been early into a market, they've been very disruptive, and they managed to win those eyeballs. Now, if you think about a Google who also has a stake in Uber, but is fighting for board seats with them, there's a clear competition going on. Google could enter this market any time because they have eyeballs. They can put product in front of people very easily. They can integrate it into their services at the very core, which Uber cannot. And they can just buy the physical assets to running something like this. So it's very interesting how the power is shifting currently, both with the car manufacturers, but also with people like Uber, because the entry barrier into this market is getting lower.
But, no, I agree with you. But don't underestimate this capability to handle those logistics and building something that is moving all ourselves with a very high safety standard, your kids, etc. And that's something that you also would expect in an autonomous driving car. It's a safe, protecting cabin, and you don't want to have this in a quality that you don't want to trust, right? And we're just seeing, and it's a very interesting phase. I always said for the past 3 years, I'm very curious if Tesla and Uber, that are both great companies, and I don't question that at all, right? But I'm not 100% sure if they will, in 5 years or 10 years from now, be retrospectively the winner of this phase. They definitely are the pioneers, but you see what's happening to Tesla right now, that it's a company who so far, let's say, succeeded in building a great new movement and technology as well. But it's a different, if you do this in a couple of thousands of devices, or if you have to produce hundreds of thousands. And the Tesla 3, that apparently puts a lot of issues on the company at the moment will decide very much about that. And that is a capacity or capability that the traditional car makers can do like a charm. Because that is, as you said, that's what they're doing for 100 years very well.
Yeah, also another thing that might happen with those vectors in the market currently, that the lifespan of a car is going to shrink. So if you have, for example, more rentals, if you go more faster production, you're not planning for a car to be on the street for maybe 40 years, but you just plan for 10 years because the people entering into this market also have a very different view on lifespan and support times and those type of things. Interestingly, when you spoke about Tesla, I mean, what Tesla obviously doesn't have yet, what the other folks have, is legacy. You have to support a lot of things. You have to work with warranties and all those type of things. That's one of the core assets when you start fresh. You can think differently. You don't have that legacy. And at some point, also Tesla is going to have some legacy. I mean, it just starts happening step by step now. So it's going to drag them down while the entry level or the entry barriers are going to be lower.
Yes, yes.
All right, so do we have any questions in the audience? Do you guys see anyone?
I can't see anything.
No. Here's one question. Here's one question.
Can we have a microphone, please?
Yeah, we have.
You were talking about big companies like BMW and Volkswagen, and but in these companies, like the development life cycle is about like 5 years or like more. Do you think like companies like, for example, like Comma AI can like get on the train of like self-driving and stuff before like big companies can invest?
So yeah, basically, do we see smaller companies also going to these developments?
Yeah, and you said Comma AI, right? Yeah. Yeah, I mean that's all the discussion at the moment that we have, and quite honestly, a lot of the discussion in the industry, besides these conventional combustion engine discussions, etc., is about autonomous driving. In Silicon Valley, there are about 60 startups at the moment building a car, autonomous driving car. And what they're actually building is the so-called SDS, the self-driving system, which is the operating system of an autonomous driving car. So, and the question is, in the industry and also in the investor community is who will succeed? Will it be the traditional ones, as you correctly said, who have these very long production or planning cycles, 5 to 6 years, or will it be the innovators? And some of the innovators recently got acquired for very high prices. Cruise Automation got acquired for $1 billion by General Motors. Otto was acquired by Uber for $700 million as an autonomous driving system. At the end, I think we will see in 2018 a lot of venture capital written off in that field. There will be not too many companies who really can afford to build it and really have the momentum. There will be some startups definitely being acquired by the big ones, but this all doesn't help. Comma AI never will build their own car, and that's not their intention. Tesla is building a car, and that's their intention. And the question is, will Tesla at the end have their own system? Will they deploy the system of, let's say, Volkswagen, or will it be a Comma AI? But the chances that there are one or two of the smaller companies amongst those are very high.
So yeah, so Silvan was also talking about that there's different stages, right, that we can contribute to the mobility. And so for some it's going to be like those self-driving cars, for some it's going to be more supporting these mobility and providing parking, you know, those tools that could simply ease our life. So yes, I think that's also could be added to the answer.
Yeah, the interesting point in that respect, there's a question I think in the back.
Yes, we have a question. And we don't have
here
a microphone.
in the back.
No, nope.
But there is a mic coming. Mic is coming here between the two columns. Yeah. Raise your hand again. Good.
You're good at that.
Yeah, we are in the location business. We can do
Hello?
that.
Good at that.
Yeah. I was wondering whether you will know what the launch strategy could look like for self-driving vehicles.
The launch strategy for
self-driving vehicles, how could that look like?
In terms of timing or
strategy, how they would launch self-driving vehicles.
Okay.
All right, so maybe these could be like something like how the organization should transform their product, their business model, and their strategy to do something like.
So very practically, how you make this transition. So you test self-driving cars. Or, so what would they do?
I mean, maybe answering a little bit generic. So if you are on the stock market, it's very hard for you to dedicate large amounts of money to things that don't pay off immediately. So it's easier for you to carve out budgets to buy people who have done it already. So speaking about the acquisitions that you just spoke about. So I think a lot of the players are definitely looking for the right moment to enter. So everybody is. So self-driving will be solved, but it's not production ready and solved yet. So everybody's waiting and staying in their pockets and making sure they have enough money to buy and start producing. Then the next question is, who's the buyer? So is the buyer for the large self-driving fleet somebody like Google who's entering the market and making competition to Uber? Is it the private sector that people actually buy it? Is it cargo, which is actually more likely, I think? So who's the first buyer? And depending on that, you can see who is going to provide first production-ready cars, and then in turn, which car company are they going to buy? Which self-driving car company are they going to buy? I don't know if that answers it at all, though.
Yeah, and I think it will be a multi-step type of launch strategy, or that's what it is. So technically, it's solved. Technically, autonomous driving car, you can go to Spain where Audi has its racetrack, where the car drives 200 laps and every lap faster because it's learning in every lap on the micrometer to optimize even if there's rain, etc. So that's solved. And there are a lot of cars driving around who have a kind of autonomous driving systems already, but that is not self-driving, right? So. But you could actually do that. And then I think what Silvan said, it's now about to wait for regulation, etc. But what a good place is go to Google X in the Silicon Valley and just buy yourself a coffee and waiting for all the Google X driving along. It's a fun experience. There are a lot of them, so it's happening.
All right, so we are kind of out of time, and my falling. So. Yes, so Holger and Silvan is going to be around.
We're going to be at lunch and we're hiring. Speak to me.
Yes, so if you have further questions, you're welcome to ask afterwards.
Absolutely.
So thank you all for listening, and see you later.
And thank you.